Welcome, family. So we're just doing an off-the-cuff review of so far in this book I've been reading about. Elijah Muhammad wrote it. It's the dude who influenced Malcolm X and other people, Muhammad Ali and such. So I thought I'd point something out. So on page 49, as you can see, for example, he has something here. In the beginning of his book, he says that he's not teaching hate towards white people, that he's not a black supremacist. However, let's read this, shall we? So he contends, let's go over here where it'll make over sense. Okay. Why so much teaching and warning given to the American black person, and so little or no teaching of the kind being given to the African and Asian black nation? Asian black nation, that's an interesting phrase. You can be half Asian, half black. However, some people argue that people from India are considered Asian, and others would argue that they're considered black. So, that's a very interesting classification, right? So, it is due to the fact that we are living in the midst of a people whom Allah, God, will destroy in the very near future. Now, notice here how he doesn't give a citation, right, of we are living in the midst of a people whom Allah, God, will destroy. So, he doesn't talk about the morality, the deeds. He's saying a people, right? Okay, let's continue. Keep that in mind. But he doesn't say, okay, what people? We know what people he's talking about, but he doesn't give a surah. He's mixing the end times for his own agenda, his own narrative. He's not talking about behavior or deeds or character, which is something that you're supposed to focus on, but instead, the simple shade of your skin. It's very strange. Let's continue. It says, we are on the brink of fire and must be removed to a zone of safety. Now, that's a good poetic line, I have to admit. That's a pretty good line. The ignoring of such warnings, and of the time of the judgment of this world, the Caucasian world, with their great universal power. Now, let's hold on for a second here. Now, he says ignoring the warnings. Now, remember, admonition is throughout the Quran. But none of the warnings in the Quran talk about a specific race of people. Talks about deeds, right? You transgress limits, signs of the hour and such. It's mostly about your own behavior and your deeds, nothing to do about race, right? So he says the Caucasian world. Now, remember, there's some people who can argue people just from the Caucasus, but remember, there's a lot of people who can be classified as white. Now, Italian, French, all these different nuances. If I met this person, he's passed away, I believe. But if I would meet him in person, I would say, where is the Caucasian world mentioned in the Quran? Where is anything about that mentioned at all, anywhere, right? And he says, with their great universal power. Now, indeed, you can argue, I argue with alt-right people all the time about, because I am half Italian, and my family 2 generations ago did leave Italy, and the other half's Native American, Indian, Cherokee, from here. So I'm mixed, right? Now, universal power. The Caucasus world does not have universal power, okay? Russia, many people consider Russians white, yet they're very mixed, right? You have all kinds of Russians. They're not just all the same color. Now, if he's going to say all white people rule the world, okay, now that's actually very insulting towards the achievements of the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Babylonians even, the Ottomans, the Egyptians, the whole Arab world, right? There's so many people who you're putting them as nothing when you say that there's the people who are white simply rule because they are white. Now, a lot of racists, alt-right people would argue, oh, we are they would say, right? They would say, the Western world is the best. Now, this is very strange because this is a black supremacist saying the same talking points as what a white supremacist would say. They're both wrong. No race of people has universal power. No, they just have a specific geographical example for their economy, right? So, it says that they have exercised over the black nation. Now, remember, even during the 1960s, yes, many Native Americans, they were assassinated. But remember, the Chinese people were here. There was all kinds of people. Yes, there's times where white people were a majority, but the period of American slavery, compared to other nations' history of slavery, is quite small, right? Rome had white people who were gladiators, who fought and they died by getting eaten by tigers and chariot competitions. I mean, Rome enslaved people as well. When they took over the Gauls, remember when we read Caesar's Gallic Wars, people were enslaved. I mean, if you look at the history of Scotland and Ireland, it was pretty brutal. Native Americans also enslaved each other. Mexico has a history of slavery. I mean, pretty much every nation has a history of slavery. So, I mean, he is right in a way that there was a time where whites had the upper hand, but I'd argue today it is not the case. However, I understand this book is a piece of its time. Let's continue. Now, it makes it very hard for the average black person to conceive of the idea of such a strong race of people being removed. So, he's talking about genocide here. He's contending, remember, that God will destroy people. Now, nowhere in the Quran does it say that Allah, glory be to Him, would ever want to destroy a specific group of people solely on the basis of the shade that He permitted them to have. Your shade comes from the equator, your position, and your geographical location, and your, history's DNA. I mean, it's not nothing to really feel too special about. Again, though, and he doesn't really give a citation for that, and notice whenever he says Allah, he doesn't even say the, glory be to Him or anything like that. It's very disrespectful, if you ask me. So, let's continue. This is a very small thing in the eyes and power of Allah. Now, see how he's saying, yeah, anything is small when you're talking about the Creator doing it. But Allah does not say anywhere in the Quran that He wants to remove white people from the face of the earth. Now, it's quite bold of Him to put such deeds in God's mission. It's really quite astounding how He could be so arrogant and boastful and say these things without, having somebody correct Him on the spot, right? But let's continue. Removing and destroying people who have brought His anger against them for their neglect and worship. So, he's contending that white people made God angry for their neglect. Well, that is a deed, yes. Each person will be specifically held accountable for what they did. Their race is not going to be held against them, I would argue. It's their own deeds, their works they put forth, not the works of their group identity, right? That's a very earthly way of thinking, right? Sharing the same skin color as somebody who committed a crime doesn't make you guilty of that crime. But let's continue. Of worship and respect of Him. Now, here's the thing. He is right, for in a sense that it is disrespectful to mistreat black people. Exactly. However, he has just called for the genocide of white people and said that, that's God's plan, which is more disrespectful. Both are actually disrespectful. But he creates this sort of paradox where he attributes things to God without Quranic citations, and he also doesn't even say glory be to Him, which is a sign of disrespect. So, for him to mention respect seems quite strange. Let's continue. Oh, also, he also contends He's the messenger, which is a little disrespect towards God because He already laid down in the Quran who the final messenger was, right? So, he's being disrespectful by adding things to God's religion, right? Let's continue. Of Him as the supreme being. Now, you could argue Christians versus Muslims and Jews and how they worship God. Indeed. Now, for him, though, to say that all whites have disrespected this God as the supreme being, he needs to provide more evidence for that. Not every white person is guilty of the crimes of other white people, right? It's absurd. So let's continue. Who do not even respect His representatives. Remember, though, what does he mean by this? He calls himself a representative, right? He calls himself that. Now, he gets in trouble with the law, claims that's disrespect and that not enough white people stuck up for him. And that's, by white people not sticking up for him, getting in trouble with cops, that somehow is very disrespectful towards God. And you have to ask yourself, wait a minute now, right? How do we know you're a representative when you're not even using common Quranic wisdom? Or even modes of speech. Let's continue. But prosecute and kill them. Now, it is true that each person who hurt an innocent black person or native or even a fellow white person or even a dog, everything will be recorded, right? So that goes without saying. And then he continues, these people have been the worst people to us, the black nation, since they have been on the face of the earth. Now that's quite bold. And it really neglects the history of the earth, if you think about it. Every person is terrible to each other, the predator-prey system, humans doing war. I mean, it's a very potent way to say something very bold and hateful. It really pierces the soul, and it really can get you angry and ruffle your feathers if you're already somebody who's experienced racism, right? This is the worst thing to tell them. Truly, it is. To say that whites have always hated black people, I just feel like it's not really about that. You know, I'm pretty sure there's been examples that we don't even know of where people got along just fine, but people war. That's what we do. It's quite sad, but it's just the way this cosmos is for now. Let's continue. They were created and made for just the purpose of destroying our peace as well as our lives. Now, again, he contends he's not a racist, but he's literally saying that white people were created by God to specifically hurt black people since the beginning of time. And remember, in the previous video, he contended that Satan, he doesn't even call him Iblis, created white people. Now, again, and he said that Jesus condemned white people in the Garden of Eden. No Quranic no Quranic citation at all. Now, where is he getting this from? Right? That doesn't make any sense, even anthropologically, archaeologically wise. It doesn't make sense. Yes, there were instances and a history of time where this happened. But, again, you cannot say that God created white people just to make black people's lives horrible, right? Remember, there's the jinn kind, the human kind, and people being tempted and going astray, they'll be held accountable for their deeds. But it is quite troubling for somebody to contend that white people are created for just causing problems for black people, because he is separating the Ummah, right? Think about it. It's very clear, as other people commented brilliantly in the first video, all the examples where it's counter what he says. No racism is found in Islam. You can be white, you can be any color, you could be purple. You could have that disease where you have multiple colors on your body, right? You can be an albino black. You see what I'm saying here? This doesn't make sense to me. It really is truly troubling, and I don't really understand, you know, how he could think the way he thinks if he actually read the Quran. I really think that maybe he was an agent. He was somebody who was really hurt, very disgruntled, you know, had an ulterior motive, because it's not Islam. This is not Islam, right? If I can see this, of course somebody more advanced than me can see this, right? But again, it's important for people to debunk these claims. Now let's see what he says here. They have destroyed 600 million of the black nation since they have been on our planet. So again, he's really telling his followers here, like, oh, white people, they've always been against us. I mean, they're spawns of the devil, he says. How does that help peace? Islam's the religion of peace, right? How does this cause peace? When you put this seed of hate inside of people, right? You're not bringing peace and unity. You're separating the Ummah, and you're causing problems for Islam and misrepresenting it and misconstruing it, and that is bad, right? Let's continue. This averages 100 million every thousands years of their rule. So, again, making up math here. Where's the evidence? He doesn't put any citations. They have affected 9/10 of the total population of the black men under their rule. Now, you can talk about imperialism. That's a system of government and a character trait of a time period, right? Of human history. But if it isn't one group, it's another, right? Something we always have to remember when it comes to systems of government. You know, absolute power corrupts absolutely, as they say. So is that really a trait specifically for white people, or is it a human condition, right? Let's continue. Including the brown, red, and yellow races. So not only does he go further and say that white people were created specifically to target black people, he also then goes even further, which is even more extreme. is he tries to get yellow, which is a horrible way to talk about Asian people, number one. Many Native Americans don't like being called red, right? You're right, they don't like it. And the brown, that's a pretty normal, many Latinos, they say brown pride, they get tattoos. So, but think about it. This person, Elijah Muhammad, is trying to unite all races against white people and is arguing that they will be removed with God's endorsement. Think about that. Think about how he is totally manipulating and misconstruing, you know, what our job is on this earth. Do good deeds. Do charity. The charity in the Quran doesn't say only give to your own race. No, it doesn't say that. Give zakah. Establish regular prayer. Don't transgress. Do not spread malice on the earth. Those who spread malice are not loved by Allah. And how is this not spreading malice? By telling Asians, Native Americans, who are the red man, and Latinos, and all blacks that white people were specifically created to cause problems and that they must be exterminated. Remember, he did call for genocide and he said that God was going to do it. Remember? Allah removing and destroying people who have brought his anger, right? He's manipulating specific people who cause, you know, malice towards all, but he's specifically tagging this on white people. Again, it is quite sad that he would say such a thing. And then he continues further, they have deceived, as the Bible revelation of John says. Now, why would a Muslim frequently cite more Christian verses, and indeed he misrepresents Christianity because he says Christianity was created only for white people, right? But remember, as we've learned, there were Christian Arabs. There are Asian Christians. There are all kinds of Christians. And regardless of how you believe Christianity spread, there are people who accept it today of their own free will, right? Especially during this time period in the 1900s, right? So again, if he believes Christianity was only created for white people and that Christianity is evil, why is he using it to frame his argument, right? If you hate something, why are you using it to frame your argument? Doesn't make sense, right? And then the world, and now they are being made manifest as the deceivers. So he's contending that white people are being, everyone can see they're deceivers. So he calls them devils, deceivers, saying that they deserve to be genocided. I mean, it's quite extreme, right? Really making Americans fear Islam and spreading Islamophobia, right? He is actually spreading Islamophobia, yet contending he's a good Muslim. Very contradictory. And adversaries of Allah and his true religion of entire submission to his will, Islam. Now that's clever. See what he did here? It's true, you have to submit to Allah. But notice how he added in all these things and then telling his followers submission to Allah. But look at all the things he attributed to Allah. So he's saying, agree with me and you agree with Allah. Even though the things he's saying are not really an Islamic mindset. Now remember, let's take it further. There's plenty poor white people, right? Your nation's power is not based off of its skin color. It's pollution, agriculture, you know, your medicine, your technology, your military, right? There's a lot of different factors to measure success of a nation, and then you'd have to get into the philosophical conversation of what is success, how is it measured, how should it be measured? Now, today we have metrics to measure that, the Human Development Index, GDP, infant mortality rate, you know, life expectancy rate. We have certain ways where we can compare data of nations, right? And they examine where are they failing, where are they doing good. But, for example, there's white Brazilians, there's black Brazilians. You cannot just say that all whites are this or that. It's terrible. He doesn't like it when racist whites classify blacks in bad ways, yet he himself uses the same methods and talking points that his adversaries use. So he's really just the same side of the hate coin with a different shade. And it is quite sad. But again, he keeps attributing things to Islam that are just really not true. So I know many of you know this, but it still blows my mind. Let me know what you think. Again, it's quite astounding how he got away with this, truly, and was able to fool people. And today, you know, Nick Cannon, even Ice Cube, there are people who still follow this man, and then don't even bother to read the Quran or do the hard part of really learning. So again, it is quite amazing how in 2020 there's people who are reviving this man's type of thinking and think that it's practical and theologically correct, which it is not. And I'm a novice, and if I can see it, many others can. So again, quite strange, don't you think?